Hey everyone, welcome to The Year Was, a podcast all about today. I'm your host, Michael Montalvo, and together we take the history train back in time once again to discover what makes today truly unique. For the next few minutes, we continue to gather random nuggets of trivia to make you sound smart, or just drop that little fact that makes others stop and say,
Hey, who invited you?
Seriously, why are you here?
I thought I was invited. But on this episode, we examine the events that occurred today, April 24th. So today, well, let me go into this. I'm going to read a little bit. We're here with Matt Vann of the Vann Cave and Tim Kreitz of Tim Kreitz Adventures. I'll have the description or links in the description for everything. But today, on April 24th in 1990, the Hubble telescope was launched. And I don't know how much you guys know about the Hubble.
I was into it at the time. I got sort of frustrated when it was initially broken and didn't work right, but eventually they fixed it.
Yep.
And it has really revolutionized astronomy. It revolutionized and rewrote astronomical history in a lot of ways.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about it real quick, just so we can kind of have a little bit of a backstory for it. From what I was able to kind of find, after 1986 and Challenger, the space or NASA really needed something that was a win for them. And so they announced this project and decided they were going to go forward with it, and then, put a telescope in space just because of the atmospheric limitations.
I can talk all day about that.
Yeah. So the thing that I watched, it was a documentary. They were saying the twinkling of the stars is because of all the atmosphere, everything in the atmosphere.
If you go outside and you look at the sky in your backyard, you're looking through a lens.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking through a lens of air that suspends dirt and moisture and funk. And the best way to see that, is the least amount of atmosphere. That's why your observatories are on mountains and in dry air and places like that. And then straight up where you're looking through less air. So those are our limitations when we're sitting on the planet.
Yeah. And so they decided that they were going to put this telescope into space. This is, already I'm already like, this is okay. These are the right guys to have here.
You got two guys that think they know everything.
Yeah. From what I was able to find out, they have 6 gyroscopes on the Hubble itself, and that keeps it, able to stay on that image. So on the 24th of April, they launched, going up with the Space Shuttle Discovery. And then 2 months later, they had a first light, which is the first images from the... See, I did look up that.
Yeah, first light's a thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they were fuzzy.
Yep.
And that was because there was a small imperfection on the mirror itself.
It was a high school math error.
Yep.
High school level math error.
Right.
Well,
is what it was.
Here's what I found out. The imperfection itself was 1/50th the width of a human hair.
Yeah.
And that caused enough distortion in it to make all the images fuzzy.
Right.
And so it was called NASA's, just NASA's blunder. NASA was wasting money for it, and it was something like $1.5 billion for it. And so they developed the CoStar, which was 5 pairs of mirrors that would sit there, and once it was into the telescope itself, and it would, I guess, redirect the light so that it would refocus.
They made glasses for Hubble.
Yep, it's exactly what they said. They made glasses for it.
Yep.
And so on December 18th of 1993, they finished the calibrations, and that's when the first clear images from Hubble came in. So from that, we were able to see everything we're starting to see everything that's really out there. And kind of the last thing I want to mention from Hubble before we really start talking about astronomy and go into a little bit more about that is that they pointed the telescope at a blank spot in the universe for a month, and it just sat there and just looking at this one spot, and everyone was like, "You're crazy for doing this because there's nothing there. You're not going to find anything." And when it came back, there were over 1,500 galaxies that we just couldn't see.
Right.
And I mean that's
called
insane,
image is called deep field.
Is that what it is?
If anybody wants to see it,
That's called the Hubble Deep Field.
Yeah. I'm going to try and find a picture so I can kind of put it up there, and you have it so you can kind of see everything that is really there. But
that thing, that is the most that is my favorite image ever of any of them, of any picture I have ever seen anywhere. It is only the only things I find more fascinating are the old back in the film days, only because as an amateur astrophotographer, I know how hard that is to do. But deep field is just, it'll blow your mind the more you look at it.
You know, I saw the picture, and I mean, it is just, I mean, it's crazy just looking at it, just seeing everything for it. And I know astronomy, and you know, we've been looking at the sky pretty much forever. And you know, you have Isaac Newton, and you have William Herschel, who found Uranus. So
Indeed, there we go.
Indubitably,
I couldn't do it. I tried.
I have a sign.
You starting to laugh made me start to laugh.
I have an observatory that you guys helped me build, and in my observatory is a framed picture that says "No Uranus jokes." We've heard them all. That being said, I absolutely loved the Uranus episode. So yeah,
going into that, what really got you into astronomy? And I mean, how did you?
I'll start with that.
Sure. Absolutely.
I was always interested, just as a kid. I took right here in Old Midland, Texas, Mr. Hicks, the astronomy instructor, had a course that they taught at the planetarium. Now, they drug us to the planetarium when we were tiny kids in grade school. Very proud of that, you know. And I took the high school course. And did you? Yeah. Took
my senior year.
2 semesters of it.
See, I don't even remember something like that whenever I was at school.
They bussed us from Midland High School to the planetarium every day after lunch for a class. And it was a shorter than usual class because they had to get us back in time to be back on the regular class schedule.
And man, I don't want to make you run long because we're in the Vann Cave where it's all about long form here. Mr. Hicks, brilliant guy. He looked sort of like Rick Moranis.
Yeah, with the glasses.
Yeah, imagine Rick Moranis, very fit-looking guy, but he had a Ben Stein voice.
Okay, so I'm picturing Rick Moranis' face, Arnold Schwarzenegger body, Ben Stein voice.
Not an Arnold Schwarzenegger body, more like he was like a short. Well, he wasn't terribly big, but he was just fit.
If somebody told me he had been a collegiate gymnast, I would believe.
Imagine a smaller version of one of the Hanson brothers from Slapshot.
There you go.
Okay.
And so I had it. The last semester of it I think I took 2. They would bus us there 6th period, last part of the day. So you're in West Texas. It's 119 degrees outside. And you go on a bus, right? And you hang out with your buddies. There's like 8 people in the class. So you're all on this bus by yourself. They put you in this seat where you're cocked back like a jet fighter seat, like halfway in a recliner. And we didn't get to see the pre-made planetarium programs that most people see today. We saw a lecture presented on the sky.
Okay.
So Mr. Hicks with his voice would show us where the constellations are. And I mean, he was a sweet guy. I think the world of him to this day, but out cold. Man, you would be, all the air conditioning was great. But anyway, long story. That's how I got into it. And that's what got me. I took some in college, also at Midland College, obviously a much higher level. I did my labs at McDonald Observatory in the 36-inch telescope. What changed my entire perspective and what made me want to do it myself was there is a 22-inch Cassegrain telescope in the public dome at McDonald Observatory. Anybody can go up there for $0, attend a star party, and go look through that thing. And I saw Saturn. I saw the Cassini division with naked eyes, man. Nothing between me and the Cassini division but some glass.
Yeah.
And yada, yada, yada. I built an observatory.
For me, it was a little bit different deal. I have, like Matt, been more or less interested in it I don't want to say my whole life, but I can remember when I became very, very interested in it was the very first time that I saw the Milky Way and recognized what it was. I was in Kentucky spending a summer there, summer of 1978. I was 8 years old, And I had never been to, we were staying on a ranch, and I had never been to a place with a sky that dark. I didn't know it at the time. And I can remember there was kind of this little party going on with like some older people, I'm 8, and like, so, there was a scene going on out there at this ranch. There's probably some things that I shouldn't have seen and didn't see, but, the 70s and a late night party with 20-year-olds drinking beer. And I just remember looking up at the sky and making a comment to one of the adults that it's cloudy tonight. And one of the guys said, "No, it's not cloudy. It's perfectly clear." I said, "No, look at all those clouds." And he said, "Those aren't clouds. That's the Milky Way." And I said, "The Milky Way, what's that?" And it is the galaxy that we're in. And so when I realized that what I was looking at was not clouds, but it was actually a galaxy, elements of the galaxy that I was in, that triggered it for me. So from then on, I was always interested in astronomy, and I had my mom buy me telescopes, and I still have a star chart, a star finder chart that I got when I was in like maybe 4th grade or something like that. I still have it, and it's a rotary star chart. So basically what you do, Matt probably remembers these.
Yes, sir, I do.
You face the north, or maybe you just face north, and then you orient this little rotary chart with the direction you're facing, and then what month and what day of the month it is by rotating this giant star chart inside the direction finder, and it shows you theoretically what you should be seeing overhead. And that's how I started finding constellations and the bigger stars and all that sort of thing. And my interest in it, never completely went away. I've had years in my life where I was just too busy doing other things and didn't pay a whole lot of attention to astronomy. But I got really interested in it again right around 2011, and got a different telescope and a few other things, and started paying more attention to it. And then Matt built his observatory, and that really accelerated my interest in it once again. And that's kind of where I am now on all of it.
Well, for me, I know it was, I was living in El Paso at the time, and that's not the best place just because how populated it is and with all the lights and everything for it. But it was back in, I'd say, mid-90s, and it was Cub Scouts. And we went outside, and we were just looking up, and we're just finding constellations and up in the sky and everything. And that was one of the things that really got me really interested in it. And then I know driving down to Sanderson, where a lot of my family is, we'll be driving down the road, and just nothing out there. It's just, road and mountains and, the sky and everything. And I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. We would be driving down, and my mom told me a story that her dad would do this sometimes. But I remember my parents doing this one time. We'd be driving, and they shut off all the car lights. And we'd look up, and you could just see just stars and everything. And it was, I think that was probably one of the biggest things that really got me interested in kind of seeing, what was there and just kind of looking at everything. So,
yeah,
I'll tell you my favorite story like Tim's is in my college course, and it was our 2nd or 3rd lab. And so we go to the 36-inch observatory, which you can pay and spend an evening in an observatory in like a group led by an astronomer. The guidance software is still running on the 386.
Oh, nice.
I think it is.
Wow.
Yeah, it's built in 1956. In fact, that telescope is built out of the cutout of the 110-inch telescope. So anyway, I'm gonna go off on a geek tangent. Sorry. So we had the scope for the night. The class did, and it was cloudy, legitimately cloudy. There's storms in, and you're way up there in the elevation, so it was like is like fog. I mean, the clouds are on the ground because you're on a mountain that's poking up into the sky. And we were having to work off of the star charts, which, it's a book, just like an atlas. And we had a target list of things we had to do, and we had to observe and do all this stuff. Well, and we couldn't see anything. And so they found some other stuff to do, and the professor gave a little lecture inside the dome, and I don't know, there weren't very many students there that night. And so he says, "Hey, Matt, go outside and see if it cleared off." And I walked outside, and I looked up, and first thing I thought was, oh, crap, it's still cloudy. The clouds are a little higher. And then I realized I was seeing an awful lot of stars through those clouds.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just sat there for a minute and realized that I was seeing all of the nebulosity. The clouds I was seeing were the Sagittarian arm of the Milky Way. I mean, I'm seeing the Milky Way. And when you see a star chart, if you look up, and you can Google a picture of a star chart, it shows where the nebulosity is, and you very rarely see it. It was everywhere, just like it was on the chart. And there were so many stars. Now, here I was already into astronomy. I knew where things were. I was good enough to give like talk to Cub Scouts and stuff like you did, and show what's where. And I'm sitting there looking at the sky I've been studying all semester, and I could not tell you which direction I was facing. There were so many stars. Yeah. And the brighter stars it was like they were like little bitty full moons, and it took me a while to orient myself to where I was, and that's how it looks in a place like that you're talking about.
Now, I know with you in your observatory and with both of you guys kind of looking up at the sky and everything, that the full moon is something that you hate, so to speak.
Yeah.
Unless you want to look at the moon.
Yeah, unless you want to look at the moon.
Well, even then, that's not the best time to look at the moon.
Right.
And here's the thing. If you walk outside, pitch black, think about the time you were going to go take a leak when you were camping, and you turn on that bright flashlight, you point it up, you see the path like a spotlight. Okay, so you see it sweeping. Well, what you're seeing water vapor and dust and junk that's in the air, both of which, we have a lot of dirt and pollen and all this kind of crap out here in West Texas. So when you have a full moon, what it's doing is lighting all that up. It's just making it glow. So when you look at a full moon, you'll see that big orb glow around it. Yep. So what we're looking for when we take pictures or look at stars is that seriously moonless night. Now, if you want to look at the moon, if you have a big telescope, telescopes are just giant buckets. They're like a funnel for light. So they're designed to pull out minute little bits of light. So when you point them at the moon, which is like a headlight on high beams, it's painful to look at. Now, what you can do, if you just want to look at the surface of the moon and kind of orient yourself with the pictures of it, you put a polarizing filter on it, which is it's like you've done that in science class, where you take polarized sunglasses and you turn them, and it changes how much light passes through. We put a polarizer on it to look at or photograph the moon. If you really want to have a great time, no matter how crappy your telescope is, go out on the new moon or the very, very last quarter and look at that. Because what you're seeing, you can actually see the mountains and the craters. You see a lot of incredible detail on the terminator, on where the day and the night side meet, the light and the dark. That's the most profound time to look at the moon.
Okay. I had a question now. I kind of lost it. So
you ever want to forget anything, just ask me a question and let me talk for 20 minutes about astronomy. I'll lose you.
I think what you were driving at was that you maybe had a question leading up to the full moon is generally a bad thing for astronomy.
For astronomy,
yeah. It is.
Yeah.
I know astronaut is a popular career choice for kids. Was that ever or something that you considered?
No, not really. I think all little kids say, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a fireman. I want to be, that sort of thing. But I never had any serious drives to be an astronaut or go into the space program. I always wanted to fly. I wanted to learn how to fly. I was always interested in aviation. I had so much family in aviation in the military. I knew at some point I was going to fly. But no, as far as like being an astronaut or that sort of thing, I don't know that I ever had any real serious drives for that.
Man, I want to keep this short for you, Mike. Tim and I I was born in 70. You were born in 69, right?
Yeah.
So we were born during the Apollo.
Yeah.
At the peak of Apollo.
Yeah.
And so
I was a swaddling infant when. Wait a second. No, I was not yet born. I was in utero. No, is that the right term?
in utero,
I was in the womb.
my mama was knocked up.
My mama was knocked up when
Right.
when the first moonwalk happened. Yeah.
So by the time Tim and I were, and my first flight in an airplane I was in Roy Schleiermacher's sailplane.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that Schleiermacher Field is named after, and my stepdad was a tow pilot, and I was strapped in my mom's lap. So I had an interest in aviation, but you got to understand, I mean, if you go watch Apollo 13, where they're talking about how they didn't televise what these guys were doing. You remember that?
Yep.
In the scene there, do these guys know they're not on TV? It was old hat. Now, the space shuttle was revolutionary, but I was interested in aviation and not space travel.
Okay.
So it was old hat, and to me, in my head as a youth, even though astronauts are, fixed wing piters, they're aviators before they're astronauts, it wasn't the same thing to me, and I was more interested in wings than rockets. Now, I flew a lot of rockets as a kid. I was super into that, and we still are.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten over that. I still fly rockets, but it was a different thing to our generation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. One thing I was just thinking about, and I just kind of remembered it. I don't know if this is true or not. You guys might have to correct me on this, but images from like Hubble don't come back in color. They come in black and white, and they take the what makes up whatever they're looking at, and they assign a color to it, and that's how we get the pictures for it.
you want that one, or do you want me to take it?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Man, I can't answer this for Hubble. I can answer this from my standpoint, from an amateur astronomer. The color we're getting that might be blue may not be blue, and it may have red next to it. And I'll give you a picture of like the Trifid Nebula that has 3 colors in it. We don't necessarily know what color that is by the time it's made it to us. There's a lot of factors, and I won't go into that. So you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And we do assign it colors. Now, people that know way more than I do about this have a little different perspective on it. But also, there are things that with simple astrophotography like I do, I miss things. Like there are things that my equipment can't see. There's nebulosity that I can't see, that I can't expose long enough, or the CCD on my camera doesn't sense. So when something like Hubble gets there, Hubble can see things that have never been seen on Earth. It has not made it through the atmosphere.
Such as the deep field.
Yeah, like deep. Well, but even if you expose deep, theoretically, if you could expose that long enough and see deep field, there's still things that Hubble's going to see that you're not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because the Hubble is not hindered by the atmosphere, among other things.
Well,
other
yeah,
factors.
there are things that the atmosphere will filter out. Okay, it's I don't know how to explain this, man. I just lost myself, but so they're right. They don't necessarily know. In other words, if we got in a starship and we go out to the Sombrero Galaxy, and we look at the Sombrero Galaxy where it's just huge and fills a viewfinder. We don't really know necessarily what color it would be. It'll be a culmination of all the objects in it. Now you fly up to another object, you get right up next to I'm going to use the Trifid Nebula again. Cloud. We don't really know what color we would see. There are theories on it, and they're probably really close to right. But by the time it gets to us, we don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
God, that was a long answer for I don't know.
Yeah.
That's how it's been explained to me that I recalled it. So.
Yeah, but
it
aren't
sounded
there,
good.
But aren't there logarithmic ways that they measure certain, I don't know if it's wavelength or frequency of light, where they they don't necessarily know what color it is, but they know how to make an educated guess based on wavelength and frequency and magnitude and that sort of thing. Is
yes.
that okay?
But yes, but you have to know the origin. You have to know a lot about the source.
Okay.
I think that's how it works.
Okay. Yeah. I'm out of my league at this part when it comes to the color shift and that sort of thing, man.
Yeah, I'm really clutching on and probably making up half of what I'm saying, but yeah, we don't necessarily.
The
know
way
that.
I kind of remember it is they were saying, like for example, this one piece right over here, that's hydrogen, and we know hydrogen as this, so we're gonna assign it to be this.
Yeah. So we know that when certain chemicals and molecules are excited, they emit certain colors.
Yep.
And so I would make the educated guess based on just the context of this conversation that they can look at something and say, we know that's mostly hydrogen, so if it's excited, it might be this color. Maybe that has something to do with it.
That's in my understanding that makes the most sense out of
Right.
it. And I've done spectroscopy and on a very elementary level, very, very simple spectroscopy like they used to do in the Coudet focus days. And that's how we know, how we learn what something is made of, what it's comprised of. And then hence way smarter people can determine where a star is in its life cycle or what kind of star it is in the first place. So we know kind of the life cycle of a star, of certain stars, and so we can look at that and go, okay, well, that star's blue, so it's this kind of blue, and it's that sort of, and it's moving or it's approaching or whatever, and then we can kind of gauge the size by, they did parallax. I think they still do parallax, just more accurate now. So it's this far away, so it's probably this big, and it's this color, so we know it's in this part of its lifespan, so it's this big. And did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
For a couple of laymen trying to talk about higher than amateur astronomy, we might be doing okay here.
Yeah.
Or we may be making complete asses out of ourselves.
I want to preface before anybody shoots me down that this is recorded after an episode of my podcast.
And after beers.
After beers. So
I didn't take that into account for
yeah, man, like the sky is amazing, man.
I do have a cool story about Coudet focus if you have time for it.
Yep.
All right. So here's how they did spectroscopy back in the day. The Otto Struve telescope, McDonald Observatory, was built in the 30s. It is absolutely magnificent. I think it's open to the public again. Now, when I was there, it was not open, and we were students, so we got to tour it, and it's incredible. When you say McDonald Observatory, that used to be McDonald Observatory. That was it. It has a post office. It has a super accurate pendulum clock and berthing and the library in there. If I were a rich man, I would duplicate that library in my home. It's incredible. It's just a neat place. It's multi-level. And I think it even had a kitchen and everything at one time. It's like a ship. Okay, it's like living on board a giant ship. Okay. So back in the day, the way they did spectroscopy was, you imagine a telescope. I'm going to try to do this visually. So it's a big long tube. It's got lenses at either end. Okay. So that's a refractor telescope, kind of like you would look through binoculars or something like that. So we've developed different kinds. There's Newtonians, and there's Schmidt-Cassegrain and Maxitov-Cassegrain and everything in between. And all they are, they're sort of folding the telescope in on itself, making it physically shorter, but optically it stays as long as it was before. So the light bounces back and forth inside of it a few times. And what they would do is inside, like halfway inside the tube, is they would have a device. They would flip a bunch of giant like steampunk levers and poke a mirror up in the middle of that and scoop some light off. And it would go down the base of the telescope, down into the bowels of the observatory, into a little room, go through a prism and fire it across this table. Okay. And on that table, they put a big chunk of film. And they would expose this strip of light coming through the prism onto that film and develop it. And that is how they knew what wavelength of light was coming from a particular star. Okay?
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you the story?
That is awesome.
Yeah.
It is.
That's how they did. It was a Coudet focus, and they had a Coudet, Coudet, Coudet focus room. Okay, so it was an actual room where they did this. So how do we do it now? We jab an eyepiece in there and hook it up to a computer. And it barfs it all out right there. You can buy one for $100 that you can see it visually.
Mm-hmm.
That essentially does what a Coudet focus did back then, and you can pipe it through to your laptop, and bam, you have it. It's not as accurate, but you've got it. And so here we are, students, and we got to go in the Otto Struve, the big telescope, and they herded us into this fairly large room, and we got to eat lunch, and they gave a lecture. Well, while we were doing the lecture, we were short on chairs. And the guy who was in charge of the observatory, he goes, hey, there's extra chairs in that closet over there. So this other guy and these two geeks were jerking chairs out of this closet. And we looked at it, flipped on the light, and we were in the Coudet room.
Oh.
Right, hasn't been used in decades, in eons, but there it was, that big flat table with everything. And of course, now they do it in modern terms, but there was the Coudet focus room. You're covered in chairs, and it was like a mop bucket in there, and paint and shit laid on it. But that was cool.
Slippery when wet signs. And
Yeah, right.
Awesome.
Piso Mojado signs and all that. Yeah.
Wow.
Man, that's cool. I'd never known that, so that's interesting.
That was a neat thing to see.
Thank you guys for doing this.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I guess I should do my outro. I don't know if I have it. I'll record it at home. It's fine.
Okay.
Oh, you can do it here. You can just wing it. We'll help you with it.
I guess that's gonna be it for us. I'm on social media, YouTube at Apple Cider Club, and that's where you can find me for most everything. Tim, you are at
Tim Kreitz Adventures. Tim Kreitz with a K.
And Matt.
The Vann Cave on YouTube. I do have a channel under my name. There's not much on it. It's Matt Vann, V-A-N-N, but the Vann Cave and thevanncave.com.
I've been on Matt's podcast a couple of times, and those are the best episodes, I think.
They are.
Yeah, they're pretty good. Tim, I've never been on your show, but one of these days
you need to get a motorcycle.
Buy a motorcycle, and you will be. I guarantee you that.
That's what I'm saying. One of these days, I'm going to get me a motorcycle, and then I'm going to invite myself to the show.
There you go.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
You have an open invitation, yeah.
Dude, nobody on Tim Kreitz Adventures except maybe one or two guys owns one motorcycle. So, man, we got plenty.
I just got to figure out how to drive it then. So it's I'm assuming it's like a bike just without the pedals. So
Similar,
yeah.
But that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir.